So we'll continue with sociology. We're going to how identities have shaped or have increased choices and creation of new identities. So if identities have created new identities, it would have meant social class has created a new identity, gender has created new identity, ethnicity has created new identity, social class, gender, they have all created a new identity. So that's what we need to talk about. So we start. Some sociologists, such as postmodernists, believe that the old certainties of identity are given way to new uncertainties. Identities, until fairly recently, were considered as to be stable and fixed. For most people, important aspects of their identity were outside their control and decided by birth. For example, being born with a fixed identity. So before now, the postmodernists, before the industrial era means like what we have right now. They felt identity was fixed, it's not contestable. That is the ideology. But now it has changed from that because social class, gender, age, they have all changed things due to globalization. So the example was made here is about being born with a fixed gender identity into a particular social class. So you are a male and you are born into a middle class family. So this continues to be what you were known for. But with globalization, things have changed over time. So until very recently, identities were clear, relatively uncertain in terms of what is expected by others. For example, people had a clear idea about what it means to be a man or a woman because there are relatively few choices available to them in how these categories are defined or in how to live as someone belonging to one gender. The social rules governing how to be young or old, male or female, upper class or working class were clear, consistent and firmly reinforced. This has begun to change, at least for people in more highly developed societies. So, identity was not contestable, like I said earlier. We wouldn't contest for identity. You're a man, you're a man. You're a woman, you're a woman. You're born in a middle class family, you continue to be that middle class family. You're born in a ruling class family, you continue to be that. Then, everything was divined. So everything was just the way it was. But now, things has changed. And what are the reasons why these things changed? The first one is globalization. We're talking about globalization, we're talking about seeing the world becomes a village, like everybody can see each other. So globalization brings about exchanging ideas, exchanging religion, culture, movement of people in and out of one country to another. So all these things exposes us to things that we couldn't, have access to before now. So that has really been brought about a change, uncertainty that has come into identity. So for globalization, a key social change is the development of global economic and cultural influences, which have opened up societies, communities, and individuals to new and different experiences. Like I said earlier, with globalization, because there's globalization, I'm able to be here to teach you here. I'm able to be in this country. Without globalization, it might not be possible. So that means I'm now exposed to new ideas, new culture, and you, with me, you start understanding different aspects of what you don't understand before now. Globalization has brought about that. So in the UK, for example, people eat food from the US, India, Thailand, wear clothes from China, and listen to music from Korea. They have imported a range of cultural ideas, styles, and fashions from around the globe. The cultural trend has resulted in breaking up identities that has increased the choice available. So the exposure to social and economical things that has happened has made us to have knowledge about those things we don't have knowledge about. As a result of that, we start practicing foreign culture, we start listening to foreign music, we start wearing foreign clothes. So we start eating foreign food. Without globalization, there won't be import and export. So with globalization, we start doing things based on even events of outside our country, outside our culture. We imitate things outside what we know, what we are used to. So this is what globalization has brought about. As a result of that, our mentality starts changing on how we say things, how we view things. That is globalization. Then increased choice. For increased choice, I said many people now have much greater choice. On one level, this is simply about what they can buy. A far greater range of goods are available and often affordable. This has led to society being based on consumerism. That means people start buying things. The choice people make have consequences beyond simply satisfying needs or owning something. They have become a way of impressing on others who and what you have. One way of expressing cultural identity, therefore, is through a display of wealth that emphasizes an individual's social status and position. More generally, consumption is linked to identity because it represents a background presentation of the self. What we buy, how we dress and wear, and how we spend our leisure time all reveal something about who and what we have. So the other reason why there is new identity or hybrid identity is because we have more choice than what we used to have. So more choice regarding where we can go to, what we can buy. So most of the time now, due to the fact that there's importation there's importation, we have access to different goods. So if we don't want to buy domestic goods, we could buy imported goods and they will be sold here. We can buy them here. So as a result of that, we have different choices to make. And based on that reason, it changes our perception about who we have and what we want people to call us. That's the first aspect. And the second aspect is that most of the time now people buy things because they want to show off. They want to showcase their wealth. And wealth is linked to whatever people see you wear or use. So people start coming up with this new identity based on the fact that they don't want to be seen as just a common person. They want to see as being wealthy, being fashionable. So these things changed because you might be coming from a family might be coming from a working class family, but you might not want to associate yourself with that working class family because you have choice. It depends, because you have choice. So you wouldn't want to wear clothes that the working class family would wear because you want to look like wealthy. You want to look like maybe a middle class person or a ruling class person. So that means there are choices for you. Unlike if there is no choice. If there weren't choices, that means everything is fixed. But the postmodern make it easy for us. So with increased choices, I could choose not to be part of the class I'm born into. So I could choose another class based on what I can put on, what I can afford. So that is the point they are making here. So the first reason why there is new identity or hybrid identity is because of globalization. And when we talk about globalization, it means we become exposed to international things, culture, different idea, different food, different clothes, different music. And there's also increased choice, which has come as a result of free trade within countries. So between countries, we can buy whatever we need to buy. If it's not available in Libya, we'll buy it from other countries. So these are the reasons why we have new identity. Are they clear? So the point here is, why do we have to, how does the creation of new identity started from? It is because of globalization and increased choice. I think that is clear. Okay, so go to new and hybrid identities now. So new and hybrid identities. In the globalized world, there are so many ways to express identities. That identity that is no longer possible to support, sustain and control simple. Center social identities. As a result, the rules governing the correct way to play out these identities, like real men don't cry, women's place is in their home, are relaxed as people develop the freedom to both invent and adapt identities to their personal taste and style. The globalized world, where everything is possible. That ideology of becoming, you are supposed to be what you are, what we know you to be. You are expected to behave in a certain way. I am expected to behave in a certain way. Those things are done. Now people start having freedom outside what their identity was. So that's why we are having an invention. That's why we're having new and hybrid identity. We start moving out of what is being the norm to start thinking about other things. Because they do it in Russia, so why can't we do it here? They do it in Gabon, why can't we do it here? So the question about why is it not possible? Start releasing people. It becomes a way people start having that freedom to choose what they want to become, what identity suits them. So one outcome of this change is that identities become decentered. People are less certain about how to behave. If there are many ways to be middle class, which is the right way, identity categories are all also more easily combined to create a whole new range of hybrid identities. Some young British Asians, for example, define themselves as Britians, a mix of both British and Asian culture and identities. This is a new identity not open to previous generations, but also a hybrid one because it combines aspects of at least two ethnic identities. The problem with almost unlimited choice, from which we pick and mix identities is uncertainty and confusion about who we are and how we are supposed to behave. Now, the problem goes to the hybrid system. It is hybrid because it comprises two different identities, two different cultures, two different ideas. It's hybrid. But because it is hybrid, then what way are we supposed to behave? That is the point. Oh, it is hybrid. Does it combine our attitude with other attitudes? Or how do we, how are we going to be able to strike a balance between attitude? That is one of the problems about new and hybrid identity. And the other one is seeing yourself as a middle class. Make the example here. Seeing yourself part of a society. How are you certain that certain behavior, how are you supposed to behave in that society? Though there are rules, there are laws that you have to follow, but not all rules and laws that we must follow. So how are we going to be able to strike balance in between society? How are we going to be able to strike balance? That is the problem about new identity. That is why we have new identities or hybrid. So I'm a Nigerian, and I'm half Nigerian, I'm half Gabon, for example. So you shouldn't expect me to behave fully like a Nigerian, and you shouldn't expect me to behave fully like a Gabonese. So I might have to behave partly as Nigerian, partly as Gabon. So what you should expect from me is hybrid behavior. That is what new identity brings about. Is it clear? So who we are, what we are supposed to be, is based on what we think we are. I think it's clear there, right? Good. So how does the idea of choice produce uncertainty? People are still socialized into a variety of roles, values, and norms, but social identity no longer sets certain standards of belief and behavior. Rather, individuals shape their life through the development of personal identities that are always unique in some way, shape, or form. While individual development and narrative, it's influenced by others. It is not determined by these relationships. Whereas, for structuralists, sociologists, socialization controls the behavior of the individual. Interactionists believe the socialization covers a range of possibilities. Every time new choices are added, the pattern of socialization changes. Eventually, even tiny changes to an individual's life can have a significant outcome. This explains how and why those socialized in the same family in apparently very similar ways develop different adult personalities. So, due to the choice we have, we can make different choices. So, based on the fact that we can make different choices, we start developing our own ways, our own personal identity on how it suits us. So, you shouldn't expect your brother or your sister to behave the same way as you, because your brother has developed his own personal identity. You have developed your own personal identity. I have developed my personal identity. So because I have developed my personal identity, I start behaving towards that identity. So that is what I am. You have a question?
Yeah, is there a specific age for someone to develop the identity, or just as you grow you keep changing?
I think as you grow up, as you start being exposed to global things, then you start coming up with a mindset that is different from your primary socialization.
So it doesn't have an age for you?
No, there's no age limit or there's no age range to that. So it just depends on when you start understanding what is right for you and what is wrong for you. So as soon as you understand what is right and what is wrong, then you start developing your own personal identity. So your personal identity is what people would see you to be, and it will become your own adult personality. So that is what the idea of choice produces. So it becomes uncertain because I wouldn't know what you will become. Unlike when it was fixed, like, oh, they are from a middle class family, so definitely they will turn out to become a middle class person. But these days with globalization, I might move the social ladder because those things that I don't have access to, based on my social background, I can have access to them now, and that as a result of that, I become improved then I become so wealthy, then I can move through the social ladder. So it is not you cannot predict how I am going to end up. That is the point there.
Yes.
Is it clear? Is it clear, please? So the decentering of culture and identity means that people are okay. So the decentering of culture and identity means that people are increasingly open to and accepting of different experiences, both the new in the sense of something not previously seen or done, and the newly different in the sense of changing how we relate to existing experience. Rampton in 2002 suggests that identity construction in postmodern society is something that involves assembling or piecing together a sense of identity from many changing options. Each individual creates their identity through their consumption choice and practices. So, with the postmodern era, we have choices to make. There's globalization. These two things allowed us to create an identity to create an identity through what we consume. So, you're going to talk about me as being a social class, or being a middle class, being a middle class or being a working class based on things I consume. So do you understand? And what I do. So identity now becomes part of our consumption or our attitude or how we act in the society. Globalization has brought about this. So something shown by the difference between shopping at a market store in a small village and a vast mall situated on the edge of the town, or the even wider range available online. So the market store presents a narrow range of goods from which to choose, as was the case with identities in the past. Shopping malls present people with the freedom to browse huge spaces filled with a wide range of consumer goods, where they shop for identities. The online shopper no longer needs to go to the mall. So, with postmodernism and the modern day era, with globalization and increased choices, the small village of a thing has stopped. Now we have freedom to choose based on the fact that we have access to virtually whatever we need. So it's just about our affordability. So if we can afford it, we get it. If we cannot afford it, we leave it. So the freedom to choose has allowed us to have new or hybrid identity. It's just about the freedom of choice, which is based on accessibility of information, accessibility of whatever it is that we have access to whatever, anything, in as much as we can afford them. So that has changed how we look, how we see ourselves, and how we want others to see us. So that's about changes about identity, which has brought about new identity and hybrid. Any question about that? Okay. So we're going to changes through classes now.
Shall we put up for
Yeah. Changing class identities. So how globalization and increased choices has brought about changing in class through identities. So Pew in 2004 argues that recent global economic changes have resulted in a blurring of traditional class identities. We can see this in cultural changes in taste and consumption. In particular, a joining up of working class and middle class taste makes it increasingly difficult to define class identity clearly. Clear boundary line between working, middle, and upper class identities have changed dramatically, although they have not disappeared completely. So, the argument is the class identity is now based on consumption. So, we wouldn't know. You might be in the middle class, at the same time, be able to afford things that the upper class can afford. Do you get the point here? So, lower class, upper class, or middle class, we might all be in the same spot at the same time. Then it becomes difficult for us to find the difference between us. So that is what changing class identity is talking about here. So it means, though there will be boundary, but the point is, you wouldn't still know, except if you go in depth to know who is who. Do you get it? So your perception from afar is, oh, I think all of them are in the middle class. Oh, they are, because they can, based on what they can afford. So you might someone in the middle class or in the working, let's say in the middle class, might be able to afford a car that someone in the upper class can afford. But the individual in the middle class might be able to afford it because its company or her company has allowed it to happen. But you wouldn't know that because it's not going to be written in the card that, oh, it was bought from the company or the company pays for that.
Yeah.
So based on consumption, based on what we consume, it becomes difficult for us to separate middle class, upper class, or social or
Many
ruling
people
class.
who are upper class always wear clothes that are not upper class, so you wouldn't know until they show you what they have.
Yeah, what they have,
So
or
you'd
what
be like, oh, I
through
wouldn't
their
expect.
through their purse or
Yes.
okay. So for Savage in 2007, he argues that although people still use class categories as a source of identity, the meaning of these categories has changed. Greater emphasis is placed on individual rather than collective experiences. This undermines the importance of class, which is by its nature collective. As a result, working class identities in particular have become more varied. Class identity is becoming increasingly fluid, based on someone's ability to choose who they are or what they want to do. So, like what we just said, class identity is becoming something of the past because these days there are choices for people. As a result of that, they might afford what you think they cannot. They might afford what they can afford things that you think they cannot afford, and they are able to afford it not because they can, but they have the opportunity to. So I could tell you I'm shopping online. The same as you're going to say you're shopping online. Whatever you're buying online, we don't want to know. But you're using your credit card or your debit card. I'm using my debit card. So I'm shopping online. You're shopping online. That is the point. So the value of what you are buying, nobody knows. But the point is that you have access to what I have access to. So as a result of that, class becomes irrelevant. Do you get the point here? So
We have the same thing.
we do the
But then
same
the
thing.
classes-
We can use the same airplane.
Yeah.
So how do we talk about class? Oh, we have the economic class, we have
Business.
the business class or the first class. Even an individual that is poor could save up to go
To first
business class or first
Yeah,
class.
or a person who's very good, like he's in an upper class, he doesn't want to waste money on it.
We'll be in economic class.
Exactly. So
So
you wouldn't know.
we wouldn't know. So it becomes something that we can't really identify. So the social class thing is trying to become, is going to oblivion. That is the point I'm making there. So now we go to changes in gender identity. Are you there? For gender identities, they said, Benyon in 2002 argues that contemporary global societies are experiencing a crisis of masculine identity caused by a combination of long-term unemployment, the loss of traditional male employment in manufacturing industries, deindustrialization there, lower education achievement relative to girls, like girls do not really go to school, the rise of female-friendly service industries. So male identities once focused on traditional ideas such as providing for family, but this is no longer the case for all. Marginalized masculinity cannot demonstrate traditional male qualities because they no longer control the economic resources on which such masculinity was based. So this means they also do those things the female does. So how do you want to call them a male? So this male identity crisis has resulted in the rise of forms of exaggerated masculinity that try to bring back traditional forms of male identity. Retributive masculinities aim to get back traditional masculinity from their emasculated peers. Typical behaviors include heavy drinking, fighting, and these behaviors are based on an idealized version of a traditional masculinity. So, because it's becoming difficult to separate a man from a woman based on what men and women can do these days through globalization and increased choices. So, the men start thinking about how to come back to the old traditional masculinity because it is difficult. They don't want to see it be like, oh, what men can do, women can do better. They don't want that thing to happen. So what they can only do is to refer back to the traditional day, which there's no globalization and increased choices. You know, why we have difficulty in separating gender now is because people start having access. Girls have access to education like boys. They have access to the same information as boys. So they do the same work as boys. Men and women can work in the same company. Women start becoming chairman, president of organizations. So, and this is happening because of globalization and increased choices. So, to go back to the men dominance, that is the point. To go back to the men dominance, it means we have to revert back to the traditional masculinity, which to me is long gone. You get it? So, yes, these behaviors are based on an idealized version of a traditional masculinity, which is one firmly patriarchal. That means the society is just about men deciding what happens, who does what. Aggressive, both physical and verbally. This is traditional. Oppositional, in the sense of rejecting complicit masculinity. So, they oppose everything that comes about putting femininity into it. They oppose it.
They don't like it.
They wouldn't allow it. These are an idealized version of the traditional masculinity. We can no longer go back to the traditional masculinity, but we are trying to come up with a new version of it because they want to separate men from women. That is the point there. Then reclamation, which seeks to reclaim masculinity as an identity. When we talk about reclamation, it simply means you want to take back something to become new. That is what reclamation is. So here they are trying to, they want to reclaim masculinity as an identity. But these days there's no masculinity anymore. So these things they could do are this. These are the things they could do. So this type of masculinity reacting against social change can be seen, for example, in violence against women and gender minorities. Feminine identities are also changing as ideas about gender equality are more accepted globally. This enables more women to move away from the conventional feminine role based on the home and family and take on new work-based identities. Some work-based identities, such as that of domestic servant, are still strongly linked to the feminine role. Globalization has led to many women from developing countries migrating to work as domestic servants, nannies, and similar roles, sending remittances as money back to their family. These are led to care deficits as children are raised by grandparents or others, while the mothers care for another family children abroad. There are also been an increase in the number of women working in the global gender trade, often due to trafficking, carrying out a conventional female role of provider of gender services in a newly globalized industry. So, the feminine identity is also changing because those emotional role carried out by women have started changing because women start, due to globalization, like I told you earlier, with globalization I'm able to be here. So, because I am here, women of my age can be here too. So that means they can as well work here, but maybe through as nannies or whatever they can do, and send money back home. Yeah. But sending money back home means they have taken a masculine role.
Yeah,
because they are supposed to it's according to the patriarchal society, men are supposed to provide for the family. So if the woman leaves home and migrates to other countries and starts putting remittance home, she has taken a father role by providing for the family. So these things happen because there's globalization. And aside that, women start thinking about whichever way they can to ensure that they can stamp their authority even in the family. So that is the last sentence there. I think gender identity is clear. The problem about new gender identity is that because of globalization and increased choices, women have access to whatever men have access to. As a result of that, they can create a new identity for themselves through gender, and they start doing what men does, what men can do. So that is what gender identity is about. So it's a woman, it's feminine, but now you can find the combination of there's the masculinity presence in that woman. That is how globalization and increased choices have changed gender identity. Is it clear?
Yes.
So going to ethnic identity now. Are you there? So for changing ethnic identity, still globalization anyway. Globalization and the association movement of people around the world, that is migration, mean that many societies are more ethnically mixed than in the past. This happens through two main processes. One, immigration, which is the movement of people into a country with different ethnic groups physically meet. Cultural globalization, where through agencies such as internet, ethnic cultures, identities are increasingly exposed to different cultural influences. So with globalization, I'm here, I can practice my culture here. You can see it, you can feel it, you can buy into it. I can buy into your culture too. So globalization has changed ethnic identity as a result of that. That's the first thing. And the other one is cultural globalization, which could be as a result of the society itself, the internet, what our exposure, things we start doing, people we talk to, the institution. So there is always, in the school they have international days, right?
Yeah.
So which you have to choose a country. How do you come up with this country, choosing this country? You choose this country because you have, maybe you have interest in that country. Whatever values the country brings, you put it into practice. So this is what globalization is. It's cultural globalization. So institutions start advertising. Institutions start making people have interest in culture, and this has changed our look, our way through ethnicity. So I wouldn't just see myself as a Nigerian if I start thinking about using practicing Libyan culture during International Day. So we choose Libya, or we choose this country. So in as much as we choose that country, we start having interest in that country. We start looking into the culture, the practices, the food, the clothes. What happens in that culture? And that is what we have to, that must reflect in us when we are representing that country. So these things also change our identity. Do you get it? So ethnicity is based on global exposure, which has allowed interconnectedness with culture, with tradition. As a result of that, we start behaving like them, we start practicing what they practice because we have interest in it. Without globalization, we won't have it. There will be blockade. It will be fixed. The Libyan will practice the Libyan culture. The Nigerian will practice the Nigerian culture. There won't be exposure of culture, which is happening now due to globalization and choices. Is it clear? So this can lead to established identities gradually changing by constantly drawing on new influences and re-establishing old identities in the face of new challenges. White English identities have, for example, include aspects of other cultures relating to music such as rock, pop, rap, and hip hop, food such as hamburgers, Asian cuisine, German beer, and the rest. Language, especially slang terms associated with youth subcultures or culture, clothing that include jeans and t-shirts. So basically, what they're talking about ethnicity is that we start practicing other people's identity, other people's culture, because we have access to them and we find interest in them. So that has bring about new ethnic identity. So this process can also lead to a mixing of distinctive ethnic style to produce new and unique identities. This mixing tends to take place on the margins of identity, involving the combination of specific features of ethnic identities rather than a complete change. So I won't become a Libyan overnight. I won't become a Libyan, but I can practice the Libyan culture. I can eat the Libyan food. So one way or the other, I start buying into the culture. So it means I am exposed. I'm having a new ethnic identity according to this. So when you see me eating a Libyan delicacy, you're like, oh, are you becoming a Libyan now? Though I am not, but based on the fact that I have access to what they eat, then I can see myself as being part of it. I think it's clear. So they talked about food and music. So I listen to the music, Libyan music, or listen to a Nigerian music and the rest. It's still part of cultural change. So culture is changing, ethnic is changing based on the fact that there's globalization, which allows us to have access to other people's ethnicity or other people's culture and practices. That's about culture, ethnic identity, and changes. Is it clear? Is it clear, please? Then we go to age identities now. That is what it's about. We'll see. So go to changing age identities. Age identities are also changing in response to social changes linked to globalization and increased choice. For the older people, for many older people in developed countries, there are greater opportunities in later life than existed for previous generations. Pensions, better healthcare, and other developments mean more years of active life after retirement. Pensions in particular have given older people financial power they did not have in the past. The spending power is known as in the UK as the grey pound, and has led to a range of industries and services aimed at older people. For example, Some type of holidays, such as cruises, are aimed mainly at people in this age group. Some older people have also adopted new technology, often a way of staying in contact via social media with relatives who live far away. So, for older people, so now we're going to age identity, which globalization and increased choices have changed. So, for older people, they don't have access to these things that we have access to during when they were our age. They don't have access to them. But with globalization and increased choices and the affordability, they can now have access to whatever we have access to. So that is the point they're making here. So due to how their level of income is also increasing based on state pension, government pension, like they have gratuities, this allows businesses to start thinking about services that they could render to them, that they will pay for. So because these services are rendered to them, it means they can have access to whatever we have access to. So the only thing is they make it a older fashion for them, but they have access to them. So they could, older people could get iPhone 16 if they want to get it. No one is going to stop them from getting it because they can afford it. So they can afford it. They have the money for it. So because they have the money for it, it's also increasing their choice. They can have access to it. At the same time, rising life expectancy and lower birth rates means that the population of the developed countries are aging. So the average age is going up, so that older people represent a growing proportion of the total population. This is referred to as aging population. Although older people are healthier and more active than many in the past, the last few years of life are still, for many people, marked by declining health and a growing reliance on care and support. This is likely to be provided by a combination of family and state. So the other stage here is rising life expectancy. Why is the life expectancy increasing? That means the likely age people are expected to live over their years. So why is life expectancy increasing? Life expectancy is increasing because nowadays there's better health care, there's health awareness, there's income. People have money now. They can have whatever they need, they could get it.
Yeah, better
So,
medication.
yeah, through health care. So this allows the older people to live longer. And as a result of that, they are able to witness the latest advancements in technology, the latest advancement of structure in the economy. That's for some older people. Some older people, they talk paragraph. Some older people take up new challenges and continue to contribute to family and community life in many ways. However, concerns about the cost of government pensions has led to recent increases in the age at which people can retire, so that working life is being extended beyond the previous expected retirement age. This means that some people who in the past would have retired are still working and contributing to the economy by, for example, paying taxes, and this is changing perception about when old age begins. So, in a nutshell, about age before now has certain expectation, but these days, age is a number. That is the point they're making. So, yeah, look at the last paragraph. They talked about continuous government spending on pension because of people that are retired. So as a result of that, government start thinking about increasing the retirement age. So by increasing the retirement age, it means people will still be active. Normally, there's people that are supposed to be retired those days are still active, working. So that makes it difficult for us to say for us to tag them as being old because they are still active. So that is the point about old age. So it becomes difficult for us to say they are old because old age becomes a number based on the fact that they are still active as we do. That is about old age people. I think old age is clear. Then for the young people and children, there are fewer children in most developed countries as a result of falling birth and fertility rates. As a consequence, children are highly valued and societies have become more child-centered. As with older people, a growing range of industries and services are aimed at children and allow them the possibility of making consumer choices that contribute to shaping their identities. So for young people and children, the society is child-centered. It means more care, more focus is on the children. As a result of that, a lot of businesses, a lot of services are rendered because of children. That is the first paragraph there. And this shape their identity. So in as much as this service is rendered to you, you'll be considered as a child. In developing countries, the age profile of population is very different. With far more children and young people in Africa, 77% of the population is under 35 A total of around 770 million people. Many of these young people have or will soon have access to social media via mobile phones and will have greater choices for shaping their identities. They will be more aware of lifestyles and living standards in the developed world. Without strong economic growth, it is likely that many young African people will aspire to migrate to developed countries to improve their life chances. So, the second paragraph is talking about the children and the young people, especially in Africa, what they have access to. So, with globalization, they have access to social media. So, with social media, with with the possibility of accessing social media, they are exposed to what happens outside their country
Yeah.
to children of their age. So if they find out that, oh, these things that the children of our peers have access to, we don't have access to it, then they would be forced to move out and start seeking for a better, a better situation for themselves. And that will shape their identity. Do you get the point there? Do you get it or not, please? Okay. So the social changes have led to the period of adolescence being extended. In developed countries in the mid-20th century, it was common for people to start full-time work in the mid to late, are you there?
Yes.
In the mid to late teenage years and to marry in their early 20s. In most developed countries, the period of compulsory education has been extended, while at the same time, many more young people go into higher education, such as studying for a degree at a university. This means that young people tend to be dependent on their parents for longer, with more living at home until well into adulthood. So they do not gain independence until they are older than previous generations were. In some countries, this situation has been added to by lack of jobs for young people and by the rising cost of renting or buying accommodation, which pushes young people towards staying in their parents' home. These trends have also pushed up the ages at which people first get married and which they have their first child. So, the last paragraph is talking about societal changes and economical situation, which has made it difficult for people, for children to become adults, voluntarily or involuntarily. So it becomes difficult for you to say they are child or they are adult because they are still with their parents. Their age has passed it, but based on the fact that they don't have jobs, getting accommodation is expensive. These things would force them to still stay behind. So they still stay behind, and because they are staying behind, they will still be cared for by their parents. And being cared for by the parents means you are still a child. So it becomes difficult for us to differentiate between a child and an adult because of economic situation. Do you understand? So that is the point about that. Any question about it? So based on that fact that you still stay with your parents, it means you cannot be free. You cannot have that independence to get married or to have a child, because you will still be considered as being a child, because you can't stay handle things. You can't, if you cannot have a home for yourself, then how do you want to handle a family? So you're still a child because you are still under your parents. So you see, it's an adult or she's an adult, but for the fact that he or she cannot afford those things an adult can afford, they will still consider him or her as a child. So that is an hybrid or a new age identity. So he's a child. He's not a child, but he's considered to be a child because of what he cannot afford. Any question about that? So that ends gender and that ends chapter 1. So you have questions to do now.
So this all just comes in paper, Mr. It's so simple.
Really? Yeah, it's so simple anyway. What is this calling from? Hello? Yeah. Fine. Fashion Lolly. Fashion Lolly. That's it. This is 4:30. 4:30 now, right? Ah, yeah, sorry about Africa. Ah, okay.